Yeah, thank you. And so I very welcome all. Good morning, good evening, good day. I would like to welcome the participants and presenters of the webinar on reviews. My name is Stanislaw Schukajlow, and I'm an associate editor of ZDM Mathematics Education. It's my pleasure to moderate this webinar, which were organized by Gabriele Kaiser, editor-in-chief of ZDM Mathematics Education. And it is based on the second of the two special issues that Gabriele and myself edited and that already appeared at the beginning of the year. So today we have the presentation of 4 original contributions. I just would like to share my screen shortly so you can see the structure of the webinar today. Just a minute. So I hope you see my screen now. And just a reminder, if you missed the previous webinar on the reviews or other webinars, you simply can look on the page, on the ZDM homepage where we have webinar recordings. I will post it also in the chat. And we have today 4 presenters on the topics. The first about teacher noticing mathematics education. The second topic is about the self-efficacy. The third one is about teaching and learning of probability. And the fourth is about mathematics education research on language and communication, including some distinctions where we know. And regarding the procedure, all presenters can share their screen with the audience. I would like to ask the presenters to be mindful of the time. Each presenter has about 10 minutes for their presentation, and then we have a discussion, and I will announce when the time is up. For the participants, it's important that you are welcome to ask questions in the chat during the presentation, and we try to pick up this question during the discussion. So now I will...
Apologies, Stanislaw, I had said 15 minutes.
For each presenters, and then we have
and 5 minutes discussion
for discussion. Time. Okay.
And if somebody presents longer, then we have shorter presentation time.
Okay, thank you,
so
Gabriele.
That you don't intervene too quickly. Sorry about that.
No, thank you. So I apologize. You see, sometimes we have some other formats. Thank you, Gabriele, for saying that. Not that people are surprised about the duration of the presentation. And now the first presenter can start. So Jonas, if you like, you can share your screen.
Thank you very much. Can everybody see my slides? I think so. Thanks. So, a moment, please. So, hello, and thank you for the opportunity to present and discuss the results of our literature review on teacher noticing in this setting. This review has emerged from a collaboration of several scholars, namely Johannes König, Thorsten Scheiner, Rossella Santagata, and Gabriele Kaiser, who have so far published, I think, 4 literature reviews on teacher noticing. Now, the current review that I talk about focuses on recent developments of teacher noticing research with a special focus on mathematics education. This presentation was prepared together with Thorsten Scheiner, who can't join us today. That's why it's me to do the presentation. What's teacher noticing? A broad research field has developed around teacher noticing, and teacher noticing may be very broadly defined as the specialized ways in which teachers observe and make sense of classroom events and instructional details. And in the previous reviews by this research team, 4 theoretical perspectives have been identified, which may help us to structure the research field on teacher noticing. That is a cognitive psychological perspective, highlighting noticing as a set of mental processes, for example, perception, interpretation, and decision-making in individual teachers' minds. Similarly, the expertise-related perspective highlights similar processes of noticing, but focuses on differences between novice teachers and expert teachers. Third, the discipline-specific perspective highlights noticing as a set of practices that teachers can actively engage in to increase their awareness while teaching. Finally, the socio-cultural perspective foregrounds that noticing or professional vision is shaped by social interactions within groups of professionals, so professional communities. Now, as the research field further develops, there are some new viewpoints on noticing. For example, an ecological embodied perspective, which sees noticing more as an interaction between the teacher and their environment. And such approaches may be seen as emerging perspectives on teacher noticing. As already mentioned, there is a broad field of research around this construct, which also reflects in a growing number of annual publications, especially in the field of mathematics education. And as we can see in this figure, which is also a core result of this review, between 2020 and 2022, there were nearly as many publications on teacher noticing than were in the 20 years before that. So this is really a growing research field. And within this field, we would like to highlight a specific viewpoint on noticing, that is noticing in connection with competence and expertise. Drawing on the prominent model by Blümeke et al., noticing may be seen as a specific conceptualization of situation-specific skills. That is perception, interpretation, and decision-making, which are dependent on other competence-related constructs, especially professional knowledge and professional beliefs. At the same time, noticing itself may be viewed as a part of competence, in the sense that it is a prerequisite for providing high-quality instruction. Focusing on noticing and expertise, teachers may, as we can assume that teachers develop their noticing skills with increasing experience and expertise. However, little research is available on the relationship between noticing and teaching experience, especially in the field of mathematics education. So we, as an author group, saw the need to identify and synthesize recent studies, especially regarding noticing competence and expertise. So a systematic literature review was conducted, and the current review that I talk about today is actually based on a previous review, which was conducted by the same author group and which focused on teacher noticing across all school subjects, based on an analysis of 181 publications between 2002 and June 2019, and focusing on conceptualizations, study methodology, and key findings. And now this current review builds upon this previous work, but focuses on recent developments and focuses on mathematics education. The review is structured by 3 research questions. First, focusing on the conceptualizations of noticing, including theoretical perspectives and the facets of noticing differentiated. Second, it focuses on study methodology. And third, on new insights regarding noticing in connection to competence and expertise. And I think for the present presentation, I think it's best to focus on conceptualizations and new insights, which are most interesting in my view for this audience. Systematic literature search was conducted across 5 databases and focusing in terms of search terms on teaching, mathematics, and noticing or professional vision, which are 2 terms that are often used as synonyms. This resulted in 222 publications, of which we selected those that were published in peer-reviewed journals, published in English language, and which explicitly focused on noticing or vision in the context of mathematics education. And this resulted in 118 publications included in the final literature selection. And those publications were then subjected to a full text analysis using an established coding scheme. This brings me to the results, starting with the theoretical perspectives and on noticing. And as we can see here, the cognitive psychological perspective is clearly the predominant one. As we can see in the Venn diagram, when other perspectives are referred to, this is rather in addition to than exclusively. And in our view, this shows that a more differentiated view in research into research is necessary. For example, considering sub-dimensions or sub-perspective within this cognitive psychological perspective, for example, the ecological embodied approach already mentioned, or seeing noticing as a part of teachers' competence. Now, focusing on the conceptualizations of noticing, we can first state that a holistic approach to noticing, seeing noticing as one holistic facet is very rare, as is to highlight making connections between classroom events and broader principles of teaching and learning. However, there is somewhat a predominant conceptualization, as we can see in the Venn diagram here, and this is actually the interplay of one input-related facet, for example, as a sensory input, for example, attending or perceiving, one facet focusing further processing, for example, interpreting or reasoning, and one facet focusing on output, that is responding or decision-making. Now, recently, researchers have aimed to expand this construct. For example, Van Es and Shireen propose shaping as part of noticing. That means that teachers actively create opportunities to notice themselves, for example, by purposeful inquiry. Now, finally, regarding noticing competence and expertise, we can first state that competence-related constructs are quite rarely addressed, except for professional knowledge, which I will go in a bit more detail on the next slide. However, starting with noticing and beliefs, there are only few studies focusing on this connection, but those studies provide quite solid evidence that there is a substantial relationship. For example, teachers with higher constructivist beliefs also show higher noticing skills. Regarding, by contrast, noticing and instructional quality, we must state that this field is seriously under-researched. Existing studies partly report unexpected findings. For example, in the study by Cross-Francis et al., there was some evidence of misalignment. That means teachers showed rather moderate noticing skills, but however, high teaching quality. Finally, focusing on expert-novice comparisons and noticing. This is also quite rarely conducted in mathematics education, but in general, there are effects in favor of experienced teachers, as we would expect it. However, again, there are partly unexpected results. For example, in the study by Bastian et al., early career teachers outperformed their experienced counterparts. And this brings me, as I already said, to noticing and knowledge, for which most of the studies are available. And I want to highlight on this slide the potential of quantitative studies in this context. However, qualitative studies are also very important. I do not doubt that. But now we have a couple of studies that focus on standardized instruments of knowledge and noticing, and that report standardized effect sizes. For example, correlations. And it's interesting to see that the span's quite large. We have non-significant effects on the one hand, and quite substantial effects on the other hand. So further research in this field might help us to better understand the influencing factors on the relationship between noticing and knowledge. I would like to conclude now by highlighting 3 possible research perspectives for teacher noticing. First, I think it's worth examining how the noticing knowledge beliefs interplay, which is really researched, where's few research available. But if especially its link to instructional behavior. Second, research on noticing is getting more and more diverse, so further literature reviews are needed that focus on specific topics such as equity, but maybe also noticing and expertise, as this might help us to better develop better or more elaborated theories and empirical investigations on how noticing as part of expertise develops. But I'm quite optimistic. There's pretty much research conducted in this field, and the field continues to develop. So I am looking forward to new research results, and this concludes my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention and interest.
Jonas, thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. And now we have 5 minutes for discussion. So please, you can ask the question in the chat or simply raise your hand, or the first question can be simply, you can start and ask the question. We see the first question in the chat. Jonas, perhaps you can open it and read it.
A moment, please.
Yes, and I can tell you that's about the data sources from what they're coming from.
Okay, the question is, while you were reviewing these studies, did you find only data sources comes from teaching video analysis, or could you able to find other data sources such as curriculum analysis of teachers? These were quite a lot of studies, so I don't actually remember whether there was a curriculum analysis. Recently, noticing has been brought together with curriculum and lesson planning, for example, called curricular noticing. So there's somewhat an overlap between noticing, that is situation-specific acting while teaching, and planning, which is also kind of a situation-specific skill, but a bit more slowly, perhaps. Regarding the data sources, you can also look into the paper. I will show you quickly that we have differentiated written report, video recording, interview, tests, and observation. And as you see here, video recording was indeed conducted, as well as interviews. However, other kinds of data sources, such as curricular analysis, were rather categorized as written report, I would think. So we would have to look in more detail in the data.
Thank you very much for Sumay for this question. Please do not use any other recording sources because we will post this meeting. So I simply would like to remind the audience about that. And we have a question from John Mason.
Do you distinguish between noticing something and attending to it possibly in different ways? Well, thank you. This is an interesting question in my view. And while coding the noticing facets, this was done by looking into, if this was an empirical paper, really looking into the analysis and focusing on which facets were differentiated in the papers, and focusing on the terms, actually. This led to differentiating between noticing as a holistic facet, which indeed is some kind of a combination between attending to and interpreting. So it's because noticing something also depends on a certain kind of interpretation, in my view. However, it was sometimes difficult to actually differentiate, as attending to something is also used in the sense of noticing something in some papers. So this was quite difficult, and often we somehow relied on the words actually used in the papers, which perhaps is another area of analysis than you are suggesting here. But however, this is a quite interesting question.
Thank you. So perhaps the last question about the direction, teacher positioning of students as thinkers and doers of mathematics. Jonas, perhaps you can shortly elaborate. Do you think that this teacher positioning of students as thinkers, do you think it might be interesting and promising?
I think this is it's only my view. Perhaps I see very much expertise in this setting and webinar, but in my view, I think this is somewhat the core of noticing, as noticing really has developed from a shift, from shifting the teacher's attention from going through a curriculum or just teaching actively, putting knowledge into heads, to seeing students as thinkers and doers of mathematics. So I think this is actually the core. And I think doers of mathematics, perhaps this is a bit something different, but I think this will help to see students as thinkers, and I also think that this will motivate students to think about mathematics. Perhaps this is very short in the setting, but it's only first impression.
And I quickly add the following sentence, that of course the thinking processes of students are actually the core of noticing, especially when it comes to the US-American discussion. So that is extremely important. And of course, it has to do with the constructivistic turn, which we are seeing all over the world. But so thank you very much for this question and for reminding us what is really important. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Jonas, for your presentation and really the answers on the point. It's not easy. And now we move, and Karin Street, Karin, you can share your screen. And please, you can pose again the questions in the chat.
Thank you very much, Stanislaw. I'm trying now. I'm not getting a preview, but I'll just give it a go. Oh, I'm having trouble actually.
Can't you see where you can share screen? Because I mean,
yes, I can see it, but I'm being told that I have to go into Zoom Workplace to open some settings, which
oh my goodness.
Yes, I wasn't expecting this. I'm really sorry.
Shall we maybe continue then with the next one, and you, while you are doing this?
I don't know. I mean, the backup is that Stanislaw shares for me.
I can try that if.
Yeah, of course.
I'll just tell you push or click.
Okay.
I'm really
Okay.
sorry. I haven't seen that message before.
So now I will
Okay,
try
well,
to share
whilst
it.
you find that, so thank you very much for the invitation. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here. And so this presentation, as you will see in a moment, is a scoping review conducted together with Stanislaw here, as well as Lars Erik Malmberg. And it was about students' mathematics self-efficacy. You can click, please. Oh, this is an old one. Just click past this one. I think this is the one I sent to you before.
Oh, sorry.
Not the one I sent to you. Maybe.
Is it? Should I change?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. I'm so sorry because
the one I sent just before the meeting. The uncertainties of digital presentations. Did you find it?
Yes, I'm trying to open it.
Okay, great. So you can click, please. Right, so just a short intro. So what this is actually about. So student self-efficacy is basically, self-efficacy is about an individual's own confidence that you're able to carry out a task that's in the future. And it is important for a range of different things, but first and foremost, it's associated with quite a lot of really adaptive learning behaviors, such as, for instance, the effort and perseverance that a student might put into a specific situation. And then obviously, ultimately, this also affects the performance. So we know that if we were able to know that two students had the same ability, if we were able to know this, if one has higher self-efficacy, this would generally predict higher performance. And ultimately, this could also predict the kinds of future career choices. So it's important both on an individual and a societal level. If you click, so I think this is really, if you can click, Stanislaw, it's really about giving individuals the possibility to reach their potentials. Now, we have this theoretical model, and we see self-efficacy as a multidimensional construct. That means it can vary in regards both to the strength of self-efficacy an individual has, but also in terms of the level of difficulty of a perceived task, and also the specificity. So you can think about mathematics as a domain, or you can go down to sort of sub areas of mathematics. Now there's the chicken and egg, sorry, question of what came first. And this has been quite an interesting sort of hot potato over a while. People have been interested in self-efficacy as it's proposed, reciprocally related to performance experiences. And it can also be both a mediator and a moderator to quite a range of learning and development processes. Thank you. So we have quite clear theoretically proposed sources. There are 4 sources where mastery experiences is the strongest one. But most importantly, sources won't predict self-efficacy directly, but they're cognitively appraised. So an individual, you make sense of the experience you've had or observed, and this contributes to your future, to your self-efficacy for the future task. Thank you. Now, so in our scoping review, we had an aim to get a snapshot, a sort of representation of the kinds of research that's being done in terms of the foci and the approaches that were conducted on students' mathematics self-efficacy in a 5-year period. And we used search terms self-efficacy and mathematics only in the title. So we know that we obviously can't have an oversight, but we hope that we get a representation of the kinds of, I guess, distributions of focus, if we can put it that way. So we had these specific inclusion criteria that you can see for yourself. But importantly, we ran this search also twice, where we also picked out 6 journals in math education where we didn't have to include mathematics in the title in order to make sure we didn't exclude or lose out on some research, because maybe in these journals people were less likely to put math in the title. Thank you. So we ended up with 198 hits, and then we reviewed them according to the criteria, and we ended up including 49 studies. Now, quite importantly is the inclusion or exclusion criteria number 2, and 26 studies were excluded because of this one. So number 2, we put together looking both at advice from Bandura or guidelines from Bandura, but also a range of other researchers that are, what can I say, key in this field. And so the criteria is listed here, but specifically self-efficacy is differentiated in that it's related to something in the future, it is relatively particular, and it's an evaluation of confidence and goal referenced. Now, we can see that in comparison to a previous review, perhaps this looks a little bit better. So I think the 26 studies, that's about 29% of our studies, but this still seems to be, I guess, an issue in the field, because it becomes hard to compare, you know, apples and pears if we're not quite sure if we're researching the same thing. Thank you. So to try to illustrate some broad trends, because I was trying to stick within the 10-minute mark, I tried to think of what a typical study sort of looked like to our review. So what we could see is that there was a lot of focus on the strength, so rather than level of difficulty or specificity, but the strength of confidence in mathematics, so the domain level self-efficacy. In relation to affective variables, particularly anxiety. In methodologically speaking, the studies were mainly quantitative, with 88% of studies with this approach, using questionnaires with 94%, that's a really high number, using a cross-sectional design and focusing on only a single level of analysis. Importantly, some studies included multiple levels to account for nestedness, but the focus of the findings was at a single level. There are not many younger students, mainly secondary students, and also there's a quite trend that's quite large studies are included with more than 500 or 1,000 participants. Now, if we're looking back to this review by Klassen and Usher, we are seeing that whilst in the last review in 2010, I think the US had the largest number of studies, and now we're seeing a slightly more broadening of the field, with China was the largest contributor from a single country. And also we had some, there are some very large scale data with these international databases. So you had 4 studies that had between 150,000 and 600,000 participants. However, there are some things that remain quite similar. So there are still very few qualitative or mixed method studies, with less than 12% in total. Now, there are a lot of interesting articles, but there's little space right now. So we have only time to mention a few. I mentioned this reciprocal relationship, and Ahrens and colleagues did a very interesting study where they are contributing to resolving this question of which direction of effect is stronger. They also included self-concept, which is, I guess, the largest competing self-perception that's often also confused with self-efficacy, and both test performance and awarded grades. So that was a very interesting study. Thank you. We're also wanting to highlight that the few mixed methods and qualitative studies that we found, sort of percentage-wise, were very useful, very interesting. And if you think back to this model of self-efficacy, where it's really about individuals' perceptions that could be contextually and socially situated, it's a complicated system, and these kinds of studies could really help to illuminate aspects of these changes. So Usher and colleagues had a very interesting mixed methods approach, where they were able to both look into general trends using questionnaires, looking at the effect of sources of self-efficacy on self-efficacy, but also go into further details of these trends. For instance, that they found gender differences in how the sources were perceived as important. And in a study by Gao, they used first a survey, and then they followed by a queue sorting procedure, which you'll have to look up to read more about, because I don't have time to go into it. But this was used in a way to untangle the differential effects of exposure to a source of self-efficacy and the importance of it. Okay, so if we can give some recommendations for future directions, we think that it's important that we continue the focus on self-efficacy as both a multidimensional and dynamic concept. We think there's a need for even more studies that can strengthen our understanding of the process of self-efficacy change. So either through, for instance, an inter-individual focus or case studies, because we know there's a problem if we try to generalize from cross-sectional data to individuals. And often we want to derive quite practical findings that teachers could use, for instance. We see that mixed methods and qualitative perspectives remain important and can be really strong contributors to this field, and the field is rather dominated by questionnaires. And in the sort of continuation of that, we see that it's important that math education researchers keep being engaged with and investigating this construct to ensure the perspectives of math educators. And then considering these conceptualization issues, it's important that we always kind of pull on all the threads and be careful with how we conceptualize and operationalize the constructs that we include. Thank you very much. I think that was it.
Thank you, Karin. So as you stick to the 10 minutes, so we can even have a few questions and go in 5 minutes then with the next presentation. Thank you very much. So please, if you have a question, you can ask them directly now, or write it in the chat. Yeah, Vesifer?
Thank you, Karin, for the presentation. Just quickly, you reviewed the literature from 2018 till 2023. I was just curious about what was there a reason for that? Because the review that you mentioned, Klassen and Usher, it was in 2010. And the previous presentation was a systematic review. This is a scoping review. I'm curious, what are the differences between these two types of reviews? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So a few different questions here. So I think this was where we set out to do just a scoping review over the last 5 years. So I think it was just a different approach to what they did. And I think with the scoping review, and I'm sure there are other people here that will be able to arrest me, but I think it's to get an idea, an oversight over the kinds of trends in the research field. So we're not saying or we knowingly say we cannot provide the whole oversight, but we can look at trends. So we were hoping that by looking at, say, title only, so we're looking search words in the title, that this would be rather representative of the type of research that's going on. Does that make sense? And actually, the research, the review by Klassen and Usher in 22, they also actually only included in the title. It is sometimes the way to do, because otherwise it would just be too big a task to be able to conduct. But it's obviously, we have to be aware of that as a limitation, that we know that there is stuff we didn't get.
Thank you, Karin.
May I answer the question about the time interval? That was actually given by Stanislaw and me. We wanted to have the most recent literature. And of course, it always has some kind of justification to do a literature review over the last 10 or 15 years. But now with a huge amount of empirical studies in many parts of mathematics education, that would really overwhelm most studies. So that was the reason why we said, okay, let's take the last 5 years, maybe 6 years. So we were not checking it so carefully, but we wanted to have the most recent trends.
Thank you very much. And Karin, there's perhaps that's very interesting question in the chat by Arthur Powell about did you notice whether racism, sexism, classism, whether they interfere perhaps with the sources of self-efficacy or?
Yeah. That's a very interesting question. So, I think we had a coding manual, obviously, so that there were certain things that we were categorizing and looking at. I think so it would go into the kinds of main variables that were being investigated, and obviously I cannot say for sure, but I cannot remember any of those specific issues that you are raising now that came up particularly. We enabled to look for instance, collective self-efficacy, but there were no studies actually in our review, and we didn't. To my memory, I cannot remember that we came across any of those. But thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you very much. Related to that, we found more from China, so it's a kind of broadening the scope. It's at least that we do not rely only on research from the Western countries. So that's a kind of the important improvement in this direction. But we should work more in this direction. Thank you very much, Karin. Thank you for the question. And now we can move to and Carmen. Please, can you share your screen?
Okay.
Thank you.
So I am presenting a paper about the recent research in teaching and learning of probability. The paper is open access and is available from the ZDM website. The theme is summarizing the recent work on probability, and the period covered is 2019 until 2023. With the purpose of identifying the main recent trends in this research and suggest new research lines to complete the work. We took into account that statistics education is a proper research area because although statistics in school is included in the mathematics, at university level we often find separate courses for mathematics and statistics, and the training programs for mathematicians and statisticians are separated in many countries, and there are specific journals and conferences. Regarding the relationship with probability, statistics includes exploratory data analysis, inference, and probability. And probability provides the mathematical models to move from exploratory data analysis to inference. We consider that probability is more closely linked to mathematics in its historical origins and method than statistics. So we consider probability education as part of both mathematics education and statistics education. There was previous extensive research from various fields. For example, in psychology, there were the pioneer studies by Piaget and Heller and others in the development of children reasoning and in the description of stages in this development. And Fishbein studied the intuition. Another program with others is the heuristics and biases in decision making. In statistics, the main interest is the teaching to students from different careers, for example, psychology, education, journalism, who do not always possess a solid base in mathematics, and there are didactic problems. And in mathematics education, the main interest is the teaching of probability at school level, as well as the education of the teacher responsible of the teaching, and also epistemological and didactical aspects. We consider all these research lines. We selected papers from GCR and Scopus Journal, published in English, also proceedings of international conferences like CERME, ICOS, or ICME, and thematic issues or books specific of probability education. We use some keywords to do the search, and prepare a database, and analyze all these materials and define the categories. These are the categories of analysis. We are commenting briefly for each of them. Epistemological reflection helped to clarify the different meanings of probability. 3 of these meanings are retained in the teachings at school level. The classical meaning, where probability is a fraction of the number of favorable cases among the number of all possible cases. The frequentist meaning, where probability is a limit to which the relative frequency is 10 when repeating the experiment many times. Or the subjective meaning, where probability is a degree of personal belief and can be updated with new data. We also found a growing interest in the concept of risk, so some possible topics are to analyze how the different meaning of probability can be complemented in teaching, or ways to relate probability and risk in the classroom. Curricular analysis examined the curricular changes in textbooks and assessment tests. By 2018, probability was removed from primary education in some states of America and other countries, but is still retained in many different countries, which are listed in the paper by Landgraf. Textbooks support the teacher and the student, but may introduce curricular changes unexpected by the educational authorities. And another influence is external assessment. For example, we found in Spain an overemphasis in conditional probability in the university entrance exams in the 12 last years. So possible topics is to analyze, continue the analysis of textbooks and external exams, and see how probability can complement other subject areas in the cross-disciplinary work. Research on children reasoning. Classical research assumed that children's ideas of probability develop much later than arithmetic or geometric ideas. But new research has now discarded this idea because it proves that very young children are capable of reasoning about probability. We found research in 4 points: the children's perception of randomness, how they acquire the language of probability, how children compare or estimate probabilities, and their combinatorial reasoning. However, most of these studies are reduced to the classical view of probability, so more research is needed with the frequentist of the subjective approaches. There has been also research on intuition and learning, continuing the psychological research on probability reasoning biases, summarized in the book by Glovic et al., For example, insensitivity to sample size, the base rate fallacy, representativeness, illusory correlation, or the composition fallacy. It is important to study how the probability reason depends on the idea of randomness, sample space, comparison of probability and correlation. So we need more research on how children at different ages understand each of these topics. Another idea is to analyze the relationship between learning probability and proportional reasoning. And we also need more studies on learning probability in different cultural contexts as the one by Morris. There was some interest in modeling in the period, but virtually all the studies are linked to informal statistical inference and not to probability per se. In these studies, probability is defined as a model, but the model depends on the view of probability you are using, whether the classical view, the frequentist view, or the subjective view. To follow the research, we need investigate on the modeling activity involved in other ideas of probability. For example, probability distribution, comparison of probability, or random variables. Many researchers in that period were interested in the use of visualization tools like the tree diagram, Venn diagram, contingency table, unit square, or on the learning of probability. But this research has mainly concentrated on the use of these tools when solving conditional probability and Bayesian problems. So other things to follow this research is to study the role of visualization in other topics of probability, for example, in comparing probabilities or in working with random variables, distribution, and sample. When students learn and what are the challenges of them when working with multiple representation and how they connect these different representations, another topic, and whether the teachers are familiar with these instruments. We also need analysis tasks and design tasks based on non-school context where Bayesian reasoning is needed. Bayesian reasoning is needed in many professions, for example, in medicine, in law, and also in education. So we need also to educate these people. So we need to design and analyze this task. And the last topic is the teacher knowledge. In this period, in addition to the common and advanced mathematical knowledge of the teachers, we have found papers concerning different facets of didactic knowledge. The epistemic facet, that is the specialized content knowledge, which is specific for teachers and enables the teacher to manage the teaching of probability. Ecological facet concerns the teacher's knowledge of how to relate the topic with other curricular themes and with society at large. Cognitive facet concerns the teacher's understandings of the students' difficulties, reasoning, and learning. The affective facet involves how teachers are able to manage the students' and own attitudes and emotions toward probability and towards the learning of probability. Mediational facet include the competence of teachers with didactical and technological materials that support the learning, for example, the visualization tools or the software. And interactional facet is the ability to promote the classroom discourse and orient to discourse toward the learning of probability. Possible things to follow this research is study the teacher's knowledge of numerous probabilistic concepts, because research carried out until the moment has concentrated in very simple probabilistic idea, for example, how the teachers compare probability or how the teachers understand fair games. But we need to know how the teachers know many other probabilistic concepts. We also need research on the teachers' attitudes and beliefs, because these attitudes and beliefs can be translated to their students. There is very few research on the cognitive components of the didactic knowledge, that is, how the teacher understands the students' learning difficulties and reasoning. Regarding the mediational component, it may be interesting to see how the teacher works with multiple representations. It's like the diagram or the contingency table in concepts such as conditional probability. And the last point is the work of the technological knowledge of the teachers, because research on this knowledge is very scarce and generally focuses only on very specific software like the Phantom or Thinkerplot. So this is a summary of our paper, and I finish thanking the organizers and the participants of the webinar.
Carmen, thank you very much for this very interesting talk. And now we have 5 minutes for the discussion. And the first question already appeared. Angelika Bickner-Asbach asked, how many papers on risk education in the classroom did you find? How many papers on the topic risk education in the classroom did you find? Did you find any? What is your estimation?
I find not very many papers, but there was thematic issue in the period about risk, the relationship between risk and probability. I found several papers, for example, by Manfred Borovnik and Remes Kapedia. Not sure if I pronounce correctly their surnames. I also found some papers but the German people, Andreas Eisler, and so on. In fact, Andreas and other people are now preparing a thematic issue on the Statistics Education Research Journal on risk for the coming year. I know because I was invited to participate, but I couldn't because of lack of time. I think this thing is important because there is much attention today in the ideas of risk, and you can find many examples of risk in everyday life and professional. For example, when you get an illness, when you are, or when you took a vaccine, or when you contract an insurance. There are many examples you can use in the classroom to help introduce probability ideas.
Thank you very much, Carmen. The next question is by Recife. She wrote, I was wondering how the themes have been identified. Were they pre-identified or you identified them inductively, or there was deductively derived? I think that is what is the background of this question.
The themes you think, we started, in fact, we started reading many survey papers that I listed in the first slide, papers by Sonesi, papers by Baird and Borovnik. There are many survey papers before this one. And also, we also brought a small survey booklet on the occasion of the Hamburg ICME, a small booklet. And we also read, so we had some previous ideas, but we finished the decision of the categories by reading the different papers and summarizing each paper, classifying the papers with similar content. Little by little, we finished with these categories. We wanted to have categories not only in mathematics education, for example, curricular analysis or education of teachers, but also some categories coming from psychology, because there is also much research in psychology. For example, the research on intuition and biases. Not sure if this response is fine for you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much, Carmen.
Thank you.
I have a question, if I may ask. Carmen, you have described that actually probability is, if I understood everything rightly, losing importance in many parts of the US, at least in the curricula. Do you have any explanation for that?
Well, I don't have the explanation for the USA, but I have the explanation for Mexico, because several years ago, I was invited by the Mexican educational authorities to go to the Mexico DF to impart a course on probability to the teachers and people and researchers in charge of developing the mathematics curriculum. And they told me they wanted to delete probability from primary school level, no? Secondary school level, no problem, but primary school level, anyway. I gave the course and tried to convince them, but I was not convincing. And at the end, they told me that they need more space to include more algebra in primary education, because in the PISA exams, PISA, I pronounce in Spanish, the International Studies, International Studies of Assessment in Mathematics and other areas, PISA, the OCDE exams, there are many questions on algebra and very little question on probability. So maybe the explanation is the influence of external assessments. If external assessment, international assessments, where every country wants their children to be on the top positions, don't include statistics or probability questions, you cannot expect that the educational authorities include probability or statistics in the first level of the schools. This is my explanation.
Yes, that would be a very bad influence of PISA. That is really awful. Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, it's a little bit horrifying because, I mean, probability has such a rich history, and it's so really interesting for students. Yeah, sorry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabriel.
Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, Carmen, again for very nice and interesting insights in your review and for the discussion. And now we move to Nuria Planas, and we will hear a presentation on language and communication and the review of results.
Thank you very much. Let me see if I have these. I should find here. Okay, let's see if you see. Can you see my slides? Great. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Nuria, we see your slides. They're not in presentation mode now, but we see them. So perhaps you can stay with that.
Yeah, now it's much better now, right? Okay. So thank you very much. Hello, everyone.
you are still not in the presentation mode. Probably you need to do it another time. It was my problem last time as well.
Oh, okay. So what are you seeing then?
Actually the slides, but not in the presentation mode.
Okay. Okay. Because I have them in the presentation mode in my, okay. Let's do it again. What about now? Not now?
No change, no change. Okay,
No change. Oh my God.
But then
So,
we go ahead with
yes, you can use also this mode. So if it will not work, it's okay, because we see it a bit smaller, but we see them. So it's
okay.
Yes, now it works. Thank you, Nuria.
Oh, great. Great. So happy. Okay, so thank you very much for including the theme of mathematics education research on language and on communication in the special issue and in this webinar. When well, David has had David's computer crashed. That's why he's not here now, but he will be watching the recorded webinar. Well, when we were invited to take part in this special issue and survey the more recent research period of the domain, we felt really excited and fortunate and challenged as well. And I remember joking, the two of us, about the small theme we had to survey, because it's a huge theme. And we started working and soon realized that that we wanted more than a survey. If it makes sense, we wanted a survey that could be more than a survey. And then in the abstract, oops, okay, so that's the abstract of our paper. We start the abstract saying that we present a narrative review of math education research on language and on communication over this period, 2019, from 2019 to 2022. But we also look ahead by addressing challenges posed by the lack of distinction between language and communication in the past, but also in the present, and in the recent past and in the present. So if we were to develop a survey on this theme, we decided that some discussion around the relationship between language and communication in the research that we were identifying was probably a good thing to do. So for us, for David and myself, language is primarily a communication process. And although communication is not always linguistic, but there tends to be much of the linguistic side. But there may be also gestures, voice intonation. I don't know if you are watching my gestures now, and drawings, diagrams. I'm using all these drawings to capture your attention on a specific part of the abstract, and using all these representations in this communication with you today. So I'm not only talking, I'm doing more than talking to communicate with you. So we were we had the idea that in our survey article we wanted to address, by doing this narrative review, we wanted to address the problem of the distinction between language and communication, or the problem of the lack of distinction between language and communication in math education, research and practice. So this is the first point that I wanted to highlight, we wanted to highlight. And there's a second point that we wanted to highlight in this article presentation, in this brief presentation today, is around which were the articles that we wanted to identify. And of course, we use some bibliometric criteria, but the two of us, we were also very much concerned with keeping and showing some sensitivity to epistemic justice and to difference in the field. So we started identifying lots of articles by the same group of authors. So we decided, okay, so we are going to try to have different world regions, different groups of authors, different approaches to language and to communication and to both indistinctly in our survey. So that's why we have all this recognition to epistemic justice and difference from the very beginning of our survey article in the introduction. Okay, so let's go to the survey. So we had three. I'm seeing you and not seeing the slides. Okay, so we decided to use some guiding questions for organizing our work, and we wanted questions that help us to make meaning of what we were finding in the review, in the publications, and somehow to make meaning of how this was related to language, to communication, or to both. And so these were the three questions guiding our survey work, which are some influential topics of math education research on language and on communication in the recent discourse. These are the years and why are they influential? This second part of this question is very much, took us lots of conversations, Zoom meetings. The second question is, which are some new emerging or old revisited concepts over this period in the research literature, and what do they add to or imply for the domain? And the third double question, the third question was, is how do some topics and concepts of the domain at present contribute to the discussion about the distinction between language and communication? So these are the three questions guiding the survey. Let's go to the first question. And in trying to, in our work around this question about around influential topics, in the recent discourse and why are they influential? Well, we had a nice folder of articles that we read and we discussed together, and we tried to capture which were the most important topics that seem to be like recurrently present in the 50 publications that we had selected. And so we came into multilingual mathematics classrooms, multimodal mathematical communication, mathematical language and discourse, interaction and mathematics learning, and mathematics teacher education on language in mathematics teaching. And of course, these are titles or themes, brief descriptions. They are explained in the article, and yeah, this is part of this is only a part of the map, only. We don't intend to mean that these are the topics, or these are only the only influential topics, but these 5 are influential topics. So these 5 are on the map of the recent discourse in the domain, in the research domain. Of course, multilingual mathematics classrooms, this theme today doesn't mean the same as it used to mean in the 90s. And so it remains, or it keeps being influential, but for different reasons compared to the 90s, to the research in the 90s. And similar things happen with interaction and mathematics learning. So, in our discussion in the paper, we talk about these themes. We identify some of the relevant publications, and we discuss, we explain why, for instance, why is multilingual mathematics classroom research today influential? Because it has moved beyond the notions of it has moved beyond empirical studies in context of poverty. It has moved beyond beyond migration, colonialism, ethnic difference, and it's not today. It's not just a feature exclusive of the learner of mathematics, but it has to do also with the teacher and with the teacher educators, working with the teachers who are to be working with learners in the multilingual classroom. So there are important differences in the topic and how it's being developed nowadays. For instance, we were discussing with David. We just chose the table for the multimodal mathematical communication to show it with you. And so you see that we have Norway, Lebanon, United States, Taiwan, Canada, Brazil, Italy, again, United States, of course, UK, and Canada. And so, of course, this is some world regions are not represented in this topic, but we did our best. And so we commented on this, on the relationships between language and communication also in these articles. I'm a bit concerned with the timing, so I'm going to the second question, which are now some new emerging or old revisited concepts over this period, and what do they add to or imply for the domain? In our work around the second question, we address commonalities. We did our best to address commonalities between topics that we had identified and introduced in our answer to the first question. And so, for instance, gesturing, it was a concept that appeared strongly at the intersection of the topics of multimodal mathematical communication and interaction and learning in classrooms, interaction and mathematics learning. So we took this concept as something that was important in the recent domain, and we also found instructional designing, languaging, and argumenting. And intentionally, we wanted to stress the emphasis on gesturing and not on gestures, or on languaging and not on language, because most of the and argumenting, because most of the articles that we were studying and discussing together, the authors and the studies were very much concerned with the practices around gestures, and the practices around argumentation and reasoning, and the practices and uses around language. So here is an example of how the concept of gesturing for underpinning or underscoring the most important conceptualizations around gesturing in this recent period and at the intersection of some of the different topics identified. We commented on gesturing, and this is very interesting because we found that like in the past and in the present we have talk moves. We found some authors talking about gesture moves. So this is very interesting, the idea of gesture moves and not only about talk moves, and gesture moves or being embedded also in talk moves. And so we found this very interesting. We also found this idea of digital gestures, digital gesturing, and concept gestures and pedagogic gestures and concept and conceptual gestures, and the discussion around this. This is very, very much relevant in these days of the domain. And these are just some examples. Of course, I could have chosen languaging, but David convinced me to choose gesturing for this presentation. And I have some few minutes to talk around the third question: how do some topics and concepts of the domain at present contribute to the discussion about the distinction between language and communication? So we found a timid distinction between language and communication in the papers, in the publications that were talking about both gesturing and languaging, gestures and language. And there was some timid idea around the possibility of moving forward the domain by developing a notion of mathematical communication register compared to the mathematical register, which is mostly linguistic or language-based in the literature that we found. But there was some authors were like pointing to the possibility of moving in the next future the domain by discussing, considering, developing a notion of mathematical communication register. So, this is my last slide. So, in our conclusions, we see as important, like in the former period to the period that we were studying, we had a kind of discourse turn in the domain, and we had a language turn many years ago. We had a discourse turn, and we are like seeing some moves into a communication turn that considers communication as more than language, and that we can still put language at the center, but there can be some more possibilities of development for the research domain by considering a kind of communication turn that we are explaining in the article. And so I think I ran out of time, but I just wanted to, we enjoyed very much preparing this article, and I hope you enjoy it also reading it, or just posing questions now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nuria. It was a very interesting talk, and I hope all participants are motivated to look into the paper, because we cannot cover all topics. Because of time, I would suggest that we will have 1 or 2 questions depending on the length. So please go ahead, ask the question.
Okay, Richard, let me see. I see a question by Besife. I'm trying to read the first question, okay? I was wondering how the themes have been.
Perhaps we have one question in the chat. Perhaps we can do with it by going by Chitong Luo. Thanks, Professor Planas, for your presentation. I wonder if you have any ideas or comments on how the existing theories of frameworks related to language and communication mathematics education could be used in the context of large language model, or i.e. AI enhanced math teaching and learning. So how you can relate it to this, yes, AI.
Wow. Thank you very much, Gilo. Okay, thank you very much. We are not, we didn't find, it doesn't mean that you cannot find them, but we didn't find research work on the large language model and on artificial intelligence tools or frames. We didn't find that. I guess if there is this initiative of this survey, special issues with survey themes, in 10 years, I guess we will find a lot of this. And hopefully we will also find something about the communication mathematical register being further developed. But I guess with David, what we found that we were surprised that we were expecting finding more of that was about the sign languages, and of course we have some nice work, but we thought that we would find more about the sign languages, but we didn't really find. I'm sorry, Jilong, we didn't find it. Maybe we didn't look in the correct direction. Maybe it was too early 1 year ago. I don't know. Sorry.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting. And so we're looking forward to that. Visifa, I apologize, but we are running out of time. And I would like first to thank all presenters, Nuria and all other. And I would like to encourage the participants to write an email to the presenters. Perhaps you have other questions, they will be happy to answer this question. So in case you all can approach them. The second, that you can again look to the webinars recording online. And the pre-last thing, Gabriele, you correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a next webinar that will be held on November 18 on the topic of mathematics teaching and teacher education against marginalizations. And you will receive an invitation, or otherwise we will send it via usual channels. So this
I would like, Stanislaw, I would like to add that this is including language as well. So we are actually combining two special issues, and maybe to mention that we have a few very prominent names like Melanie Craven and Robin Jorgensen. And by the way, due to current political issues around IGMI 15, we have invited Yayasri Subramaniam to talk about actually her paper, Math Education, Tamil Language and the caste question in India. And I guess that should be maybe an interesting topic for the next webinar.
Yeah, thank you very much. And so as the last and most important thing, I would like to thank you all as the presenters, but also the participants, and of course, Gabriele Kaiser for doing this huge work for organization of this webinar. Thank you very much, and see you in November.
See you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. It was nice seeing you.
Thank you very much.